Alice Butler Short. She's the founder of Virginia Women for Trump, and she joins me in the studio. Alice, sort of listening to some of these closing arguments from representatives in the House, I just want to start by getting your reaction to the passionate debate that we've witnessed today in the House chamber.
Well, I think it's an absolute disgrace. It's a disgrace to for the Democrat Party, and it's a disgrace what they're doing to our country. And I'm not upset because I see this as almost a blessing in disguise, because at the end of it, history will reflect that they have done something very, very bad. And there is no impeachment is supposed to come following a crime or a misdemeanor. There is no crime, there is no misdemeanor, there is no wrongdoing. So what they are doing to this president in trying to overturn his election, his legal election by the people of this country, by we the people, is a real disgrace.
And Alice, I just want to point out to our viewers, you're looking at live pictures out of Battle Creek, Michigan, where President Trump is addressing a rally of his supporters. This is all happening as the House is set to vote on these two articles of impeachment. We're gonna bring our viewers back to this. We're going to listen in live in just a minute. Just one more quick question with Alice before we pivot to the president's comments on this impeachment inquiry itself and the vote, which he's had a lot to say about. I just want to ask you one more quick question, Alice. You know, as you mentioned, the president is going to likely talk about his political record and the things that he's done for this country. And is that really what viewers do you think will be looking at in the 2020 presidential election?
Absolutely. This president has done more in 3 years than any other president that I can remember. The economy is soaring. The market is breaking all records. Our military is strong again. Deregulation has really put a lot of jobs in the way for people.
Okay, he's talking about impeachment right now. Let's take a listen in.
Not because of local government, but because of us, because of the job that we've done, because I understand she's not fixing those potholes. That's what the word is. It was all about roads, and they want to raise those gasoline taxes on you. We don't want to do that. But she's not fixing the potholes. But Michigan's had the best year it's ever had. Best year it's ever had. And that's because we have auto companies expanding and thriving, and they're coming in from Japan, and they're coming in from a lot of other places. Look what's happening. And you know, I don't know if you know this, but probably 10 years ago, I was honored. I was the Man of the Year by, I think, somebody, whoever. I was the Man of the Year in Michigan. Can you believe it? A long time. And that was long before I ever decided to do this. I was happy. I had a beautiful life. What the hell did I do this for? But look how we're doing. Do we love it? I love it. But anyway, I was the Man of the Year. And probably like close to 10 years ago, and I came to Michigan. He said, "You're still the Man of the Year." Thank you. Who said that? Thank you. So I came in, and I remember the speech so well. I said, "Why are you allowing them to steal your car companies? Why are you allowing them to go to Mexico and to go from China, where they come in from China, they build them in China, they sell them into our country with no tax, and you lose your jobs, you lose your factories, the companies leave, and you get nothing? Why are they allowed?" I asked that a long time ago, and we've stopped it. We've stopped it. You see that. And we just made the USMCA. We're getting rid of NAFTA, which I think is the worst trade deal ever. And it's very exciting. It's a great deal. It's a great deal. It's going to stop exactly what we were just talking about. It makes it very, very prohibitive They can do it, but they got to pay a hell of a big price to do it. And history has proven that stops them. But we have a great USMCA that we negotiated with Mexico, with Canada. Now, from the standpoint of the farmers, you know what's going on. We had tremendous trade barriers in Canada.
Okay, we're going to dip out of the president's comments for a second. We just want to show you to the left side of the screen here. This is the first incoming results of the vote that is happening in the House right now. This, again, just as a reminder to our viewers, there's two articles that are going to be voting on. The first article is whether the president abused his office. The second article is whether he obstructed the congressional inquiry. This is the first vote right now on whether the president abused his power. We can see there on the screen, 145 Democrats have voted yes. That number is increasing. Again, this is not a surprise. We did expect the majority. This is the majority Democratic-controlled House. Looks like 86 Republicans have voted no at this point. So, again, these tallies are still coming in. This was not a surprise. Now, in order to impeach the President of the United States, you only need one of these articles to go through, as our correspondent on the Hill, Yasmin El-Sabawi, has continued to remind us. In fact, let's cross to Yasmin now. Yasmin, the debate has wrapped up. We saw a lot of applause from both Adam Schiff, who was addressing, and also Republican Senator McCarthy there. Congressman McCarthy. Can you just wrap up a little bit about how this ended, how this hours-long debate today ended, and to then go to this vote?
Republicans will complain that you now have a partisan impeachment.
This was supposed to be 6 hours. That's the time allocated for the debate. But of course, it went over by a couple of hours. But as soon as senior members of House leadership began speaking, Judiciary Ranking Member Doug Collins, House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy, that's when we knew we were in the home stretch, that the vote was coming. And the last person we heard from was Congressman Adam Schiff, of course, the chairman of the Intelligence Committee. He led weeks of investigation into this, closed-door hearings, public hearings from career Foreign Service officials, and that's how the evidence was gathered to then develop the two articles of impeachment we're seeing today. We heard Congressman Schiff talk about why voters should care about something that happened in Ukraine. And this is important because a few weeks ago, the former chief of staff for President Trump, Reince Priebus, told U.S. media in an interview that ultimately a voter in Wisconsin who cares about bread and butter issues, who cares about the economy, who cares about taxes, isn't really going to care what President Donald Trump told a foreign leader on a phone call. And of course, Republicans also say in general that whatever was spoken about on that phone call didn't really materialize because Ukraine did end up getting much of that military aid. Some of it still hasn't been delivered, of course. And also that ultimately President Zelensky and President Trump did meet. It wasn't at the White House, but it was at the UN General Assembly.
Will become the third American president.
So, Yasmin, I'm looking at the tally right now. I'm going to read it off for you because I'm not sure if you can see it or not. 164 Democrats have voted yes. It looks like 112 Republicans have voted no. There is one independent that has voted yes. Can you kind of walk us through these numbers? What's the threshold here when we will see the totals dip over into the fact that we definitely know that the president's been impeached?
So this is going to take a couple more minutes, and of course the magic number here is 216. There are in total 435 seats in the House. There are 431 members voting today for vacancies. We expect that 2 Democrats will vote not to impeach because they're in districts that are very vulnerable. It could go either way next election. And among Republicans, we do not expect any to break rank. So the magic number here to look for is that as soon as it passes the 216 vote threshold, the President Donald Trump will be considered impeached. It will be a hugely historic moment, a very rare event in the United States Congress. He will be only the 3rd president ever to have been impeached. Of course, before him, Andrew Johnson, the late 1800s. Richard Nixon, of course, resigned just before the full House could take a vote. And then, of course, most recently, Bill Clinton. And in fact, Bill Clinton was impeached 21 years ago, almost to the day, December 19th.
All right, Yasmin El-Sabawy, it looks like Democrats are 180. They have voted yes. 120 Republicans have voted no. As you mentioned, the magic number is 216. So you're right. We're about a couple minutes out. Let's cross over to Courtney Keeley, who's at the White House and has been sort of following the president's movements all day today. Again, we were listening earlier into that rally in Michigan. He's speaking to a rally of his supporters there. Courtney, you almost couldn't have timed this any better in the sense that this vote has happened literally moments after President Trump has taken the stage.
Well, as the vote was taking place, President Trump was demanding that a protester and somebody that had held up a middle finger was kicked out of the arena where he is. He called her a slob. He said it was a disgusting gesture and that was a disgusting person. It played to the crowds who cheered and made a lot and clapped along with him as he stopped his speech to demand that this person be removed. Now, it's a smaller venue than it usually is, but it is packed. People have been overnighting to get in. And President Trump started with the Christmas message. Then he is spending about a third of the time on impeachment. There's a Christmas tree with a Make America Great hat again. He will definitely continue to talk about the U.S.-Mexico-Canada trade agreement and job numbers. He is ignoring impeachment as much as he possibly can while his aides scrambled all day to go to the Hill, to keep the House Republicans on message, while Kellyanne Conway remained on point here and spoke to reporters here today at length. She called the articles of impeachment specious, and she also said they were slim. Now, this is what their argument is there's just not enough to make these claims against President Trump. There's not enough to really impeach him, that it's just a partisan battle. But there are enough votes in the House with the Democrats that will vote to impeach him tonight. He will be the 3rd president in the history of the United States to be impeached, and it's imminent. Meanwhile, he's at his campaign rally among supporters. He didn't time it exactly like this, but, to have these things happen at the same time is really incredible. And President Trump does like to be a showman. And so he's very much speaking to his audience of supporters tonight. He very much spoke to his audience on Twitter today, saying that this was an assault on America, this was an assault on the Republican Party. He said that he basically called it all lies, and they're just throwing mud at these claims. Now, the claims are articles of impeachment, the claims are abuse of power and obstruction of justice, but the way the White House plays it is to talk about the job numbers and then also say, look, he did nothing wrong, but he did solicit foreign interference from a foreign government against a political rival. And that's what the president and what his aides and his supporters refuse to acknowledge, that that's what he's facing tonight. But because they know once it heads to the Senate, then the Republicans will be in charge.
As you mentioned, Courtney, this vote is imminent. We're waiting for that 216 threshold. If we could put those numbers back up on the screen again from Capitol Hill, I want to see where we're at right now. Again, the House is voting on the first article of impeachment. If we could just have our gallery staff put those numbers back up on the screen. Thank you. Okay, so it looks like Democrats 208 yes. So that means they're gosh, math is not my special suit being a journalist. We're just a few votes shy away from that 260 majority. We're eight votes away. We're going to watch for that to happen. Courtney, if you're still with me, I just want to ask you what the Republican strategy has been on this so far. We did hear from the president earlier, sending out some fiery tweets. How do they plan to handle this going forward? I know you mentioned this is going, of course, to the trial in the Senate. Republican Senator Lindsey Graham seems to be discouraging both the president and Democrats from calling any witnesses. He wants this to be a quick trial.
Well, basically, you have to remember that the obstruction of justice charge here for the articles of impeachment at Congress against the president is about him not letting White House staffers testify. The House Democrats, instead of getting embroiled in the courts and getting that tied up in red tape for months or years, they went ahead anyway without White House aid. So what happened was you had you had the Democrat Chuck Schumer in the Senate tell in a letter to his Republican counterpart, Mitch McConnell, that they wanted these witnesses, like acting director Mick Mulvaney, like former National Security Advisor John Bolton. And then the White House replied, you don't have the right to call witnesses. Now, this is another sort of political football where they volley back and forth. The fact is the White House obstructed those witnesses and did not answer subpoenas during the House investigative process. Now, that's what the Democrats are saying. But the points that the Republicans point to is they just say, you had it in it for the president since he was elected. You've always wanted to do this. They keep insulting Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, saying that she's sort of running this sham, and President Trump reiterating over and over and over again, calling it a witch hunt. Now, it's very hard to keep up fact-checking with the things that he has said, but then you have someone like Kellyanne Conway, who was here standing close to where I'm standing now today, saying these articles of impeachment can't stand. She said, I've got the memorandum, I've got the transcript of the phone call with the Ukrainian President Zelensky, and it says nothing. Now, one reporter said, well, does President Trump regret anything, like that he asked for a favor? And she said he regrets nothing. Another question was put to President Trump in the recent days was, he basically said he has zero guilt about this. What he said in a tweet today was, can you believe I'm getting impeached today? Pray for me. Now he's talking to supporters, and it's amplifying his message because it's on Twitter, it's on live news as this vote's going down. So it's like a battle of the message right now. President Trump couldn't have planned this better to be able to have that microphone tonight and say, it's all untrue, I did nothing wrong. However, history will then tell the truth after this, and we will know in history what these articles of impeachment were, who stood up, who didn't stand up, and according to constitutional scholars, this is something they'll be mulling over for years. But the fact will remain that President Donald Trump will be the third president in the U.S. history to be impeached, and no one would want that. Nobody
and Courtney,
in the country,
you're absolutely right, because right now,
party,
Courtney, we have passed
party,
that
so
216. Courtney, we have passed that 216 vote threshold. Democratic votes keep on climbing. It's now 219. If you're just tuning in, U.S. President Donald Trump has now become the third president in U.S. history to be impeached. Okay, I'm looking at two no's on the Democratic side. It looks like 167 Republicans have all voted no. I want to bring in Alice Butler Short, who is the founder of Virginia Women for Trump. She's been standing by with us in the studio. Alice, I know we've been jumping around a lot, but I just want to start by getting your reaction to this.
Well, my reaction to this is that it's a total sham, and of course it is a disgrace. Abuse of power. I don't know how any intelligent person could listen to that phone call or read the transcript and say there was any abuse of power in the conversation with President Zelensky. But if you want to talk about abuse of power, I think we should point to former Vice President Biden. That was abuse of power when he on video, it's there for everyone to see, said that he would withhold $1 billion in aid if they didn't, within 6 hours, fire the prosecutor who was investigating the corruption with the company who employed his son and paid millions of dollars to him. That was abuse of power. Our president did not abuse any power in any way, shape, or form.
All right, Ellis, thank you for being with us. Just sit tight for a second. I want to cross back over to Yasmin El-Sabawi, our correspondent, who has been watching this vote on Capitol Hill. Yasmin, Democratic votes, 224 yes, 2 no's, 175 Republicans no. We knew that there were going to be some Democratic representatives who were on the fence about whether to vote for impeachment here. Can you break that down a little bit for us? It was appearing in the beginning of the week that there were quite a few, and it does seem that some of them have bowed to pressure and have voted for impeachment. Do we know who the 2 people are that have voted against it, and perhaps why?
So based on the numbers you've given me, yes, 2 Democrats. Jeff Van Drew is one of them, and he actually is switching parties because he's just in a district that had voted for Donald Trump in the last election. The other one, I believe, Colin Peterson in Minnesota, also a Republican-heavy district. He's not voting for impeachment, but as I said, Van Drew is going to switch parties. He's actually been the subject of about a 6-week push by Republicans to get him to change his mind, not only on impeachment, but even the party that he's in. And that's something the president has touted on his Twitter account in recent days and celebrated. But now that we know the president has been impeached, Article 1, abuse of power, and that we've crossed the magic number of 216 in the House. I really can't stress what a historic moment this is. It's such a rare event. And many of these lawmakers, the time they took today, 8 hours leading up to this vote, is because a lot of them, I suppose, don't expect they'll ever really see this again. And so taking the time to make a statement, to convey to their constituents that they took a stand and how they feel about this, and to really take in this moment in history. But it's also interesting to think about how far we've come, because in the spring of 2017, just a few months after Donald Trump was sworn in, Congressman Al Green began sort of a campaign to impeach Trump. Of course, he was laughed at and he was mocked. But he did force up to 3 votes on the House floor on impeachment, and there were gaps of time in between each, but with every vote, the number of people who wanted to impeach the president grew. This, of course, also increased after the Mueller report came out and after Robert Mueller testified in the House. And, of course, a year ago, almost a year ago, freshman Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib from Michigan, just hours after she was sworn in, used an expletive to describe a president in a now very infamous incident, and said, we're going to impeach him. Of course, she was also ridiculed, we understand, even reprimanded by Nancy Pelosi, because up until a few months ago, Nancy Pelosi, the House Speaker, did not think that impeachment should happen. She thought that even with the evidence from the Mueller report, that just wasn't enough to make the case. And she thought it was a risky move, especially that they were a year out from the federal election.
All right, Yasmin El-Sabawi there on Capitol Hill monitoring this historic vote. If you're just tuning in and you're wondering what all those numbers are on your screen right now, the majority in the U.S. House has just voted to impeach President Donald Trump. They voted on the first article. That first article is abuse of power. Voting is still happening right now. We want to cross over to Jeffrey Stacey now. Jeffrey Stacey is a former State Department official. Jeffrey, I wanted to start by getting your reaction. We have far surpassed that 216 majority. The numbers on our screen show 228 Democrats have voted yes and 2 no. It looks like there is one independent. Okay, they've changed it. For a second, they had one Republican voting in favor. They've changed that. It's now one independent. 189 Republicans have voted no. Your reaction?
It's really quite extraordinary. This is a solemn, historic day in this country. We've now watching this threshold get passed. I'm afraid to differ with my Republican colleague. We have a president here who has essentially broached our Constitution. And we have evidence of this. It's been entered. The debate has been quite, well, really, you can't imagine higher drama than this, more scorn on both sides, accusations of all kinds. But in the end, this is the third president of the United States that's been impeached. That threshold has been reached. And the president has followed me to my home state tonight, where I've just arrived for the holidays myself. But Democrats, we are not jumping up and down. We take this very seriously. It is a day to remain sober in our assessment that this president did indeed deserve to be impeached.
So, Jeffrey, when I was listening to the hours of debate happening in the House, Republicans and Democrats were echoing a lot of the same sentiments throughout the day. Democrats were using their tagline, "No one is above the law." Republicans were insisting there was no quid pro quo, that the phone call was perfectly fine. Can you think of a time in your political career that we as a nation have ever been more divided than we are right now?
Absolutely not. This is without precedent. If we look at the time when Nixon was almost impeached, Clinton was, and all the way back to President Johnson, we actually saw the opposition parties still respect decorum and the process. And even if some of them didn't vote to, like, say, in the setup to, Nixon's close impeachment, you had Republicans that went to the side of the Democrats, and that caused him to resign right before he was impeached. If we compare that to today, and it's clear we have never been this divided. We see Republicans in the House and the Senate saying extraordinary things, including Mitch McConnell telegraphing in advance how he's going to vote, and he's a juror in the Senate trial that will be taking place in early January. That is extraordinary. It is without precedent. And what we're hoping for on the Democratic side is that additional evidence will be coming out with additional testimony. And we want some of these Republicans to shift. It's their duty. They swore to uphold and protect the Constitution against any foreign enemies. They've all taken the same oath.
So, Jeffrey, just before we go, an average of all polls is now showing that impeachment is actually less than 50%. Less than 50% are polled to have said that they believe that the president should be not only impeached but removed from office. We know polling has its flaws. Certainly, if you look at the 2016 presidential election, Donald Trump was not polled to be the victor in that. But I'm curious as to what your thoughts are in terms of if Donald Trump is impeached and he is reelected in 2020, does that change the events of today? And I want you to hold that thought for me for 1 second. I'm being told that House Speaker Nancy Pelosi is addressing the House chamber. We need to take a listen in.
Opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The ayes have it. For what purpose does the gentleman from New York seek recognition? For what purpose does the gentleman...
Madam Speaker, I ask for a roll...
For what purpose does the gentleman from New York seek recognition?
I ask for a roll call vote.
A recorded vote is requested. Those favoring a recorded vote will still rise. That will be in order. A sufficient number have arisen. A recorded vote is ordered. Members will record their votes by electronic device. This is a 5-minute vote.
Okay. All right. We just heard the House Speaker, Nancy Pelosi, addressing the Assembly. She is now calling for the second article to be voted on in this impeachment vote. The first was the majority in the House has voted to impeach President Trump for abuse of power. The second vote that's going to be happening now is whether the president obstructed Congress in its inquiry. We are seeing those numbers roll in right now. And as, of course, as our correspondent Yasmin El-Sabawi pointed out, 216 is that magic number. Looks like it's climbing pretty quickly. Let's take a quick listen in to President Trump, though, who's speaking at a campaign rally in Michigan right now.
That night. It was 1 o'clock in the morning. That means it was election day when I started speaking. Hillary, Barack Obama, Michelle Obama, and Bill Clinton, they did an emergency trip. They did an emergency trip to Michigan at 6 o'clock. They got here at prime time. They started to speak. She had 500 people. I got here at 1 o'clock in the morning the next day, which is now election day. How many people were there? 32,000. 32,000 people outside, inside. It was the last speech in Michigan. And they said, well, sir, it's very hard to win Michigan. I said, why would it be hard? Here's the beautiful thing. Everything I told you, I've done, but much more so. I said I was going to bring car companies back. I said I was going to bring in. I just hope you people know that. I just hope you know it. But I'll never forget that night. And, you know, in all fairness to Bill Clinton, you know, he used to be a friend of mine until I ran for office. I like him. I like him. But he told, you know, the way they tried to shut him out, right? Because he's a pro. He's an instinct guy, right? He's instinct. He doesn't need polling companies and all. Who the hell wants him? You know, if you want a polling company, pick up the newspaper. The problem is the newspaper polls are more fake than the news they write. They write fake polls. It's true. They write fake polls. You call them suppression polls. You read them and you get depressed because it looks like you're doing badly. They do that. I think it's almost worse than what they write, and you can't get much worse than what they write. So what happens is Bill Clinton said to Crooked Hillary, his very dishonest wife, said, Crooked Hillary, do you think he calls her Crooked Hillary? Don't worry about it. Maybe he just calls her crooked.
All right, I'm going to bring back in Jeffrey Stacy. Jeffrey, sorry we got interrupted there. We thought that the House Speaker, Nancy Pelosi, was going to give some remarks on the back of that first article vote. They've now started to vote on the second article. I want to just go back to my question to you originally, which is that we've seen polling numbers dip just slightly. Less than 50% of Americans think that the president should not only be impeached but removed from office. If Donald Trump indeed gets reelected in 2020, do you think it changes the sentiment today of this historic vote that we've seen in the House chamber?
It really doesn't. I mean, history has been made today, this evening, this very evening, indeed, in the state where I am, where the president is speaking as we conduct this interview. And the importance of this goes to the article that they just voted on, the abuse of power, which really brings together the bribery charge, the essentially the reaching out to a foreign power to interfere in the coming election. That is the very serious one. Obstruction of Congress is somewhat serious. Of course it is in terms of it leading to a presidential impeachment, but it is the first one that it really has the great historical kind of gravity to it. And that really is going to be etched in stone. It is something that the president himself has responded to and really in private told many supporters that he didn't want to be impeached. And he's done everything he can, including in this really quite wild letter to the speaker, expressed kind of sentiments that we've never heard a president in this country express previously. It is that critical, that important, and in historical terms, this day is one that is going to live in infamy.
So, Jeffrey, I want to pick up off of something you said earlier, which is we know that Chuck Schumer had called for several White House aides to testify in the Senate trial. That is the next step of this process. And of course, moves to the Senate, which acts like a courtroom, and it decides whether to convict the president and subsequently remove him from office. Republican Senator Lindsey Graham says he does not support Trump or Democrats calling witnesses in the Senate, and he wants the quickest trial possible. What do you think we will see happen in this Senate trial, which we know, of course, is now absolutely going to happen?
Right. I think that none of us really know because a lot is happening behind the scenes. And the thing that we're watching most closely is whether 3 or 4 or 5 Republicans will basically allow some of these new witnesses to be called, which Chuck Schumer, Senator Schumer, has asked. And this was rejected by Senator McConnell. But if people like Susan Collins and Lisa Murkowski and Cory Gardner and others break from the president, maybe not on voting to remove him, but at least on calling witnesses, then we could actually see some very critical kind of smoking gun testimony from the likes of Don McGahn or John Bolton or Mick Mulvaney. If that happens, then all of these dynamics could change a lot faster than is at present on this day being predicted.
All right, Jeffrey Stacey joining us not too far from where President Trump is addressing a rally of his supporters in the key battleground state of Michigan. Jeffrey, appreciate you being with us. I want to bring back in Alice Butler Short, who's the founder of Virginia Women for Trump. So just picking up a little bit off of some of the points that I was talking about with Jeffrey, and I just want to make it clear to our viewers that Alice could not hear what Jeffrey was saying. When we're talking about a Senate trial, we know that this moves to the Senate next. President Trump had originally said he wanted the whistleblower to testify, Joe and Hunter Biden to testify. Is that a good idea here?
The president wants it because he wants to totally clear his name. That's what he's like. He's all out there. And this president has been persecuted from day one. Only 20 minutes after he was inaugurated, the Washington Post ran an article with the headline, "Now the impeachment starts." Nancy Pelosi last week said it started 2.5 years ago. And Rep. Green actually said we must impeach him, otherwise he will be re-elected. So this is a sham. And Maxine Waters has been out there screaming, impeach 45 for 3 years. And I believe that on November 3rd, 2020, the American people will speak and the Democrats will fall on their own sword.
Well, we have the results for the second resolution in right now. Looking on the screen here, Article 2 has been approved by the 216 majority. Right now on the screen, 220 Democrats have voted yes, 3 Democrats have voted no, and 162 Republicans have voted no. Interesting to see, I guess, one number higher here of a Democrat who voted yes to abuse of power, but no to obstructing Congress. Not unclear whether that's the same person or not. So, Alice, going back to you, the president is addressing a huge rally of supporters. Can you tell me a little bit about, you represent Women for Trump. Can you tell me a little bit about why you are continuing to support President Trump well into the 2020 presidential election?
Well, first let me clarify that I do not represent the official Women
Alice,
for Trump.
I apologize. It looks like the president's reacting to this vote right now. Let's take a quick listen in.
But they've been trying to impeach me from day one. They've been trying to impeach me from before I ran, okay? Because if you remember, when I ran, I went immediately to number one, never came off number one. We had center stage from day one in the debates. So we had, 14, 15 debates. We had a total of 18, actually. People forgot there was one that they never talk about, but that's okay. But we had 18 people, and I was center stage. And I said, wait a minute, this is no good. I want odd numbers. Because if you're center stage, if you have a 10, that means 2 people are in the middle. So I said, make it 11 or make it 9. Okay? Or I'm not showing up. And generally they did it. Because we were way ahead from the beginning, but I made a lot of great friends out of that group, and many of them are good friends today, although you wouldn't know it based on they say that was the meanest. That was a pretty mean primary, you gotta say. Wasn't that fun? Through their, I liked it, through their depraved actions today, crazy Nancy Pelosi's House Democrats have branded themselves with an eternal mark of shame, and it really is, it's a disgrace. Democrat lawmakers do not believe you have the right to select your own president. They think that the Washington swamp, which we believe it or not, it ain't easy because they got so much stacked, including these guys. You know what? These guys are a part of the Democrat Party. They are a part of it. You might as well call them Democrats. No, the media, look, I know. You know, it's hard for somebody to know if you're not the subject, because how do you know the New York Times is totally dishonest, or the Washington Post, or ABC is so bad, CBS so bad, NBC, I made a lot of money for NBC with The Apprentice, right? A lot of money, a lot. Plus we had the #1 show a lot, and they had nothing in the top 10 except a thing called The Apprentice. And they treat me so bad. I brilliantly said...
Okay, the President of the United States addressing a rally of his supporters there in Michigan, reacting off of those 2 majority votes on the articles of impeachment. U.S. President Donald Trump has now become the 3rd president in U.S. history to be impeached. We heard him saying there at the rally that the House Speaker, Nancy Pelosi, and her Democrats have branded themselves with the eternal mark of shame. I want to go back to our guest, Alice, here. Alice, you've been so patient, and I know we're jumping back and forth a lot, but you represent Women for Trump.
Now, I do not represent the official campaign Women for Trump group. I am grassroots, and I founded our group in 2015, and we haven't stopped. We never stopped from day one. And it has grown into thousands and thousands of women and into many, many other states. We are the grassroots. Of course, we support the official group, but as grassroots, we are able to work, of course, with integrity a little bit outside of the box. And we engage with people just like the president does, with Democrats, independents, and even people who have never voted before.
And why will you be voting to re-elect the president?
Because I'm a woman, and women are beginning to realize how wonderful this president is. Who do we think of first? We think of our families. What has the president done for our families? And what have the Democrats ever done? Now families are thriving again. The paychecks are higher. This Christmas is going to be a better Christmas for them. They also care. Mothers care about parental rights. What is happening in our education system is really dreadful. So we know that the president will pay attention to that. And we love the fact that he's the first president to defend Christianity, both here and the persecution of Christians overseas.
All right, Alice, we really appreciate you coming on to TRT World. Thanks for being with us on the program.